may want to follow up on Commissioner Lehman's questions in a moment, but first I want to ask a question looking into the current moment. We have heard from various sources that following our invasion of Iraq, recruitment for al-Qaeda has increased substantially, such that al-Qaeda is recruiting new members faster than we can kill the old ones. And I'd like to hear from Dr. K, picking up on the observations made by Mr. Fitzgerald and Special Agent Duran on the issue of hearts and minds, where we are in that respect.
If I may, I'm going to pass the buck here to Mr. Davis.
Sir, I think we have to look at it in terms of the al-Qaeda leadership that we're focused on in South Asia. And are they able to actively recruit new members, bring them into a place where they can train and vet them, indoctrinate them, and then deploy and direct them in operations?
Well, let's stop with the first part of that, recruiting. Is it correct that there has been an infusion of willing recruits?
I believe that as Dr. K talked about the international jihad, there has certainly been an upsurge in radicalism and individuals willing to join that international jihad.
Can you quantify it?
No, sir. But we do see the evidence of increased individuals coming into Iraq, but it would be hard to say that that's the absolute limit of it.
And that's just Iraq. What about the rest of the world?
I think that you see in terms of cells being taken down, for example, in Europe, that again, there is an uptick in the number of individuals willing to volunteer for jihad. I think that is separate from the organization that existed in Afghanistan in terms of its ability to bring tens of thousands of recruits into a secure location, train them, vet them, and bring the best and the brightest into an organization called al-Qaeda, and then deploy and direct them. That is a very difficult task for al-Qaeda to do today.
Now, with respect to Commissioner Lehman's questions about the Cole bombing, something that interests me as well, and tying it to other information which we now have about what was going on in Afghanistan in the summer of 2001. We now know, as a result of debriefings from KSM and others, that in the summer there was a dispute between Mullah Omar and Osama bin Laden about the external terrorist activity of al-Qaeda, and that Omar was trying to put the brakes on Osama bin Laden, and obviously he didn't succeed, witnessing the terrible events of September 11th. However, has there been an analysis made as to whether, if the United States had followed through on the warning which was made during the Clinton administration to the Taliban, that unless they curtail or dislodge al-Qaeda, that the United States would hold the Taliban responsible for activities of bin Laden and al-Qaeda against the United States or its interests. And so putting together the question of whether if the intelligence community had been more robust in or accurate in communicating its conclusions about the responsibility of al-Qaeda for the Cole bombing, and if that had been communicated without this preliminary assessment and other qualifications which we know had been communicated to both administrations, is there not a realistic possibility that had there been a strike against the Taliban, holding it responsible for al-Qaeda's actions against the Cole, that the plot might have been disrupted, that bin Laden might have been given the assessment in no uncertain terms by the leaders of the Taliban that you can do no more against the United States operating from Afghanistan?
Well, let me point this out again.
Well, actually, I directed it to Dr. K, since this
I'm glad to
is,
pass.
this is more, I think, up the CIA's alley, but I'd be pleased to hear from you, Pat.
Well, first of all, I don't think any such assessment was ever done, at least nothing that I'm aware of. And I can only speculate as to what might have been the consequences. I suppose what the Taliban response would have been would have depended to some degree on exactly the nature of of what the U.S. did. And again, I don't know what that might have been. But we also need to, I think we need to keep in mind that the Taliban and bin Laden had a relationship going. And the Taliban was very much under the spell of al-Qaeda and bin Laden at the time. It was willing to put up with international condemnation, sanctions, even, despite, because of its support for international terrorism at the time. And, if you look at even after 9/11, after we did indeed threaten retribution on the Taliban if they didn't turn over bin Laden, I think, they were willing to suffer destruction rather than hand over bin Laden. So on the basis of that, I can only speculate that not much would have changed the Taliban support.
Do you not credit Khalid Sheikh, last question, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's statement that both Mullah Omar and the Pakistanis were putting pressure on Osama bin Laden, not after the call, probably recognizing his responsibility for the planning of the
Right,
call?
and it's true that they were putting pressure on them. It's also true that bin Laden defied them, and they did nothing.
Well, my question was, had we responded robustly with an attack against Taliban interests, that they would have gotten the message, no more toleration for Osama bin Laden?
It's certainly possible, but we just will never know, I suppose.